Greetings, gentle viewers, and welcome back to Cult Theatre. Up until now, our giant insects have been caused by the unintended application of various forms of radiation. But how about we get a new global problem into the mix? Global warming.
Well, not exactly. At first glance, Deadly Mantis looks like a typical Burt I. Gordon film. I had to double check on IMDb just to make sure that it wasn't. In fact, the only thing that this movie and our previous outing have in common, other than the prodigious use of stock footage, is that this film was also featured on MST3K.
And if you think that MST3K has been referenced quite a bit this month, you're wrong. It's only been twice, and if you think this is bad, wait until I get to the Gamera films.
But on to our current subject. After a brief introduction that reiterates Newton's third law of motion over some stock footage of a volcano erupting and showing us the titular mantis in a block of ice, we also get a lesson in how the US military protected the country from those awful Ruskies with a liberal application of radar. After all that, we finally get somewhere plot-wise when a remote radar station is attacked by something that kicks up quite a wind and makes a buzzing sound. Well, since the radar station seems to be out of radio contact, the colonel of the command station heads up there to check the situation out, only to find both radar operators missing, the station destroyed, and some very strange tracks in the snow. Later, a bomber plane falls to the same strange buzzing noise, and the wreckage is also inspected by the colonel. Again, no bodies and the same strange tracks in the snow, but this time there's something else. A large, slightly cone-shaped something that the colonel sends on to Washington. The scientists that the Pentagon brings in, however, are stumped by the object. So the head of the science team suggests bringing in an expert in paleontology, since that's the only field that they didn't bring in for the first round. And we cut to the National Museum of Natural History.
Awesome place to visit if you ever get the chance, by the way.
Where our science man for this movie, one Professor Ned Jackson, is discussing an article for the museum's magazine with the writer of the article, Marge Blaine. Jackson gets a call from the Pentagon and heads over to examine the object from earlier. He explains that it isn't bone but cartilage, which indicates that whatever lost the thing, it wasn't an animal. Jackson goes on to deduce that it might have come from an insect and orders a test to be run to see if his theory is correct. Obviously, if the title of the movie is to be believed, it is, so it's off to the Arctic Circle to get a first-hand look at what's going on up there. Of course, Marge is coming too.
Can't have a proper monster movie without the female lead getting menaced, right?
Speaking of females getting menaced, when we get to the Arctic base, we get a rather awkward bit of business with all the men overreacting to the presence of a woman. Yes, I know, different times. Anyway, after a trip to the crash site from earlier and a bit more awkwardness, the titular mantis appears and wrecks the Arctic base, and bullets and flamethrowers don't seem to be doing much against the thing. It does fly off, however, and the search is on. The only confirmed sighting, however, is by a Canadian radar station who reports that the mantis seems to be heading southward. So a wider net is cast and the mantis turns up again in the Washington area. A city bus is taken out, as is a train, and after a brief stop to visit the Washington Monument, the mantis takes off again, this time heading northeast. After losing it for a while, the mantis is spotted heading for New York City, so the commander of the Arctic base, Colonel Parkman, takes to the skies to see if he can't shoot the mantis down. He doesn't. In fact, he just collides with the thing. Parkman survives, as does the mantis, but the mantis has landed in one of the tunnels that the traffic from the suburbs and other outlying areas use to get into New York City. Obviously, conventional weapons aren't going to be of much use, but they do have a couple of specialized bombs that might do the trick. So Parkman and a squad of soldiers are sent into the now sealed tunnel after the mantis. There's a nice creepy atmosphere going on inside the tunnel as the squad picks its way through the abandoned cars littering it. there's quite a bit of fog to obscure the squad's movements from the creature. Unfortunately, the fog also obscures the movements of the Mantis, a problem which very quickly overtakes our heroes. After a bit of rather pointless shooting, one of them remembers that they brought along some bombs to deal with the problem, but of course only one bomb isn't enough to get the job done. And after another round of pointless shooting, the second bomb is thrown, which, while not immediately effective, does eventually bring down the oversized garden pest. We then get a short epilogue where an autonomic response from the Mantis nearly takes out our female lead. Fortunately, the handsome Colonel Parkman is there to save her, and the movie is wrapped up with a nice romantic bow.
And that was The Deadly Mantis. And what do I think?
It's not a bad film overall. It moves along at a good pace, never really dragging at any point, except perhaps for the very beginning with the lesson on radar position to the US military. The acting isn't too bad, and except for a few minor characters, the cast does quite well. The special effects are roughly on par with them, so not quite up to today's standards, but still rather believable. The biggest problem with the movie, I think, is that there isn't a great deal that stands out about it. It is, in very many ways, a typical 50s monster movie. That is to say, all the elements that make up this particular subgenre are there and are done competently, but there isn't anything about it that will grab the attention.
So overall, The Deadly Mantis is perfectly typical of its genre. And if that's what you're looking for, I can give this one a recommendation. Now then, next week promises to be a little more interesting. Not better, exactly, but certainly more interesting. It is fairly typical for African natives to have American accents, isn't it?